What's up, everybody? Welcome to another awesome episode of Life in a Show podcast. I'm Jason Wojo, your host. I got Polish Peter on the line as a co-host. Dude, we got a really, I think, important topic today, man. You brought this up, and it was something that I thought was really valuable for us to kind of share with the community, man. So what are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so I had a conversation recently with one of my students, and we got in a conversation about pain and suffering and wondering, like, why is this that, the question becomes like, why is this stuff happening to me, right? What's going on here that I'm in this bad place and it keeps going over and over again and it doesn't, change. Nothing changes in life, or not many things change in life. And I feel like there's a lot of people going through similar situations right now. In fact, like, was it a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, OpenAI came out and said that in their statistics that they collect, over 1 million people that are talking to their ChatGPT talk about, possibly ending it all, kind of a thing, which is insane to me. It's like crazy statistics, right? That people are going through it. So, gets me to kind of think about what's the difference. And I am not, dismissing that people are going through some hard things, because we don't know anybody's story of what they're going through. But I think it's a really important conversation to have and actually talk about, because a lot of times people don't talk to anybody. They just suffer inside in their mind, and they are not, it's hard to help. So, by the way, if you are listening right now and you're going through some hard times, reach out, talk to somebody. There's, hotlines that you can reach out. So don't go and thinking about, that you have to do it all by yourself. So that's where the topic comes on. And I think it's a really important thing to discuss, but there is a big difference between pain and suffering. And what ends up happening, I think a lot of times, because we're not clear on this, what we end up doing is that looks like it's the same exact thing. And we stay in this place in a negative, way of living in life in our mind that keeps us stuck in there. So I thought we talk about this and what the difference is between pain, suffering, and how you can actually shift away from that thinking. Make sense?
Yeah, man. So why don't we define let's start by defining what pain is and what suffering is, so we can kind of get everybody on the same page before we dive in.
All right. Yeah. So pain, let's talk about pain for a second. So there's a couple of different pains, right? There is the physical pain. So if you put your hand on the stove, you pretty quickly, and it's hot, you're pretty quickly going to know it's pain, right? So, but that pain, or whether it's emotional, something outside of your life happens. Let's say you find out maybe your loved one passed away, or something happened, you lost your job, or whatever it was that was outside of you that had a negative impact on you. And that initial reaction, that instant reaction, whether it's emotional, like a heartbreak or whatever it may be, it's in that moment. That's pain. You know what I mean? And we can't really avoid that. And sometimes that literally just happens because it happens, kind of a thing, right? Suffering, on the other hand, it's optional. And let me explain what I mean by that. Optional meaning it's suffering goes on for long periods of time. As a result of that painful moment or painful interaction, painful situation, we start to create story of what that means, who we are, how we are living in life, and that story starts to going around in our head, what it means about us, what it means about life, and all those different things in here. And that pain, that suffering goes on for a long time sometimes. So pain is instantaneous, kind of a thing, very short-lived. Suffering can go on for years, and for some people, even for a lifetime. I mean, I don't know if you ever met someone who is in emotional pain for long periods of time, but that is not emotional pain, that is suffering.
So clarify for me, man, would you say that somebody who has chronic pain, are they, what do you is that, I mean, you know what I mean? That's a legitimate thing, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, so the chronic pain, yeah, it is, that happens all the time for someone. Let's say they have a chronic pain in their back, right? And they have to take medication to help them with that, all the kind of stuff. But what ends up happening, that chronic pain, it happens in those moments, it happens all the time, but in those moments. But what ends up happening is there is a suffering that comes with it. is the story that they tell about themselves, how they are, what they're doing, and all those kinds of things, and what their life means, and how they, and that emotional suffering can either relieve some of that pain or make it worse in a way. I don't know if you ever read the book, Man's Search for Meaning. You ever read that, Vojo? I think you have, right?
Yeah.
But if you listeners, if you never read the book, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, there's two parts in this book. And the first part, he basically explains him living in, well, living, not but like by his choice, but he was in a concentration camp during the World War II. And he details the craziness that was happening in the concentration camp to all the inmates with him, how they were trying to break him down emotionally, physically, everything, spiritually, everything you can imagine. One of the worst things that you can experience. And yet he came out of it, and his spirit wasn't broken. He wasn't crushed. He was actually be able to go and come out of that. So why is that? And I think he was experiencing the pain, but he was not, staying in the suffering. He was not suffering in that place.
So let me bounce this back to you. Tell me if I'm thinking about it correctly. So to me, it sounds like pain is the actual experience of the incident itself, or the insult to your body, the physical, the damage, the whatever, and then suffering is really your internalization of what that maybe means for you. Is that right? Or what you can or can't do now, or like how you think about it. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So you look at you, not just a pretty face. You kind of know.
Well, I'm trying to just like, because we didn't talk about this, before, and I want to make sure that I'm clear. Like, so someone can be in legitimate pain, and then one person could have a different story about it, and like, hey, this is a new normal. I just got to get over it and do the best I can. And then somebody else could choose an internal frame that says like, man, why did this happen to me? Like and then they just make it, and like, now I can't do anything. And so is that kind of what we're getting at here?
That's what we're getting at. Now think about it this way. You ever been in the accident and there was, let's say, 2-3 people in the car in an accident, right? Same accident, same exact thing that happened. But when people come out of that car, one is grateful. I can't believe, everything is okay. We had, the property, it's fine, whatever. We'll replace the car. I'm so glad that everybody is good. Another person comes out and they're angry and they are, I can't believe this happened to me again, and you did this, and whatever it might be, right? They have a different experience of that accident. So why is that? And one of the biggest reasons is because the meaning, the story we tell ourselves about our life, about ourselves, and how we experience this life. So that's why I think, look at from the perspective of, there are so many different instances that we see in life, some of the famous people that go through pain, and they go through that pain, that actually that pain, they make it work for them, meaning like it even gets them going even more, right? Like, I'm going to endure that pain, or I endured this pain, and I'm never going to let this happen again. I'm going to go and rock this out. I'm going to make a difference in people's lives, or whatever it might be, right? Like, for instance, you'll see, let's say, a parent who lost a child to, let's say, drunk driving. And what do? They take that pain and they do something amazing out of this, because they go start a nonprofit and they, rock things out to protect so many other kids, or make a difference in the community, or whatever it might be, right? So they took that pain and used it, the meaning that they associated with it, the way their story came out of it was more empowering rather than disempowering. Does that make sense?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, and you see those happen all the time, right? Like, and by the way, just for clarity, that pain can be emotional, it can be mental, it can be physical.
Yep.
But here's the question, man, that I think is really important to dive into is like, so all of us are going to go through pain. Like, I think it's an inevitable part of going through life. Like, we're all going to experience it. How does someone, two things. How does someone who is going through pain make the conscious choice to view? Because man, dude, it's like when someone's in, like, it's so hard sometimes if you're going through it to see the, to like, is it a timing thing? Like after a certain amount of time, like that time passes, you feel better about it, or is there something you can consciously do to change your mindset? And then also I'm thinking about too is like, how do you support somebody that's in this position? So for instance, like, it's like, dude, how many of us have ever had that person who's like, oh, on the bright side, did it? And you're like, no, on the bright, screw the bright side. Like, this is what I'm going through right now. And it almost feels like you're minimizing what they're going through. So like I think those two things are really valuable to try to see if we can figure out some like tangible advice for people as they're either going through something like this or, seeing someone they love or care about go through this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a really good point, a good question, because think about it this way. In those kind of moments, like something bad happens, and now you have this quote unquote positive person that
Oh,
comes
dude,
in
you
and
want to
says,
murder them, right? Like, you're
yeah,
just like, I'm going to choke you.
and conversation comes in that's like, you're not living the reality, you're living the la la land, and you're crazy kind of a thing. And, because that's not the reality of the situation. And that's good, right? Because, I mean, that's totally understandable, because let's say someone passes away. The reality is someone passed away, right? And someone that you love, that was close to you. And that was a really, impactful moment that happened in your life. Now, one thing that I want you to consider is that most people do not know, let me see, are not aware of their story, that they have been living, of how they view themselves, how they view their life for the majority of their life. They're not aware of it. They're just living. Because think about it this way: how many times do we actually go and challenge our thoughts? Like the thought that pops into your head, how many times do you actually go and say, no, that's not true? You know what I mean? We pretty much just go living. It's majority of our life is automatic. 95% of our days just automatic. We just go about doing it. So the step number one, I think, is being aware of what my story is, what the meaning that I associate with life, about me, about life, to see, to make sure, is this aligned with what I want in life? Or is this aligned to help me with this suffering? Or is this aligned of how do I want to heal, kind of a thing? Because if you think about it, at some point, that person's, when they get out of that place of suffering, their story shifts, their story changes. Like I remember, like, think about it, like my divorce, for instance, right? One of the big things that, obviously that moment when that happened, it was painful, and a bunch of different moments after that. But what ended up happening afterwards is I started asking myself the question of what the hell's wrong with me. It was over and over and over and over and over again, in my mind. And on the outside, I was telling people I'm fine, everything's good, nothing to worry about, I'm good. But deep down, I was suffering. And that led me to being depressed. And in fact, like I've had so many conversations, let's say, with my kids, and they said like, Dad, you were never there. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So what ends up happening is that story, at some point during my time, I started looking at myself to figure out what that story really is. And what I discovered is that from very beginning, way back in the day when I was a kid, I felt like I didn't have a voice, like nobody cared about me, and I couldn't, say anything because everybody would basically, steam over me or whatever it might be. And I had to make people happy. I had to make people like me, because if I didn't like me, then I'm bad, and all kinds of different things. That's when people pleasers show up for me, all this stuff, right? So I started looking at that story of my entire life, kind of thing. And what I discovered in that moment, that story was supporting, it was giving me the answer to the question, what the hell is wrong with me? Do you follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening is at one point I shifted my story to be able to go and say, maybe I should be asking a different question. Maybe I should be looking at life differently, because obviously it's not helping me here. And the way I started looking at life differently is I started saying like, everything's happening for me, not to me. Like everything. Doesn't matter if it's good, bad, or ugly. Everything is happening for me. And that's when I got, closer with Christ. When you look at from the conversation of spirituality and God and Christ, you start learning a lot about why we're here, What's the point of life? And all those different conversations. And what ended up happening is I was saying, everything's happening for me, not to me. So then if that's the case, I started asking that question, what's one good lesson that I can pull out of this particular whole situation? There's got to be something good, right? There's got to be something good there. So when I started looking from that conversation, all of a sudden, guess what? I started finding reasons why maybe this has happened for me. And I started pulling myself out of that, out of that hole, so to speak, right? So when you are with someone who is dealing with those kinds of situations, I would basically say that, listen, be there for them. Sometimes just a matter of just sitting there with them, not saying anything, letting them talk, letting them vent. Because think about it this way. A lot of times in life, we human beings feel judged, right? We feel like we can't be ourselves. We can't say anything. So sometimes just a matter of sitting there with them and not passing any judgment so they don't feel judged, and just listening them to talk and asking them questions as opposed to telling them what you should or shouldn't be. That's why I think a lot of this, kind of a fighting comes in, because someone tells me, you shouldn't be this way, you should be a different way, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. So I think, that I love that, challenging your story, really looking for like consistency. And it almost reminds me of like, I have a slightly different take on this, but it was helpful for me. Like, so I've had multiple moments in my life where like things like were really sideways. One of course was the divorce that I went through as well. The other one that was pretty substantial is when I was in a motorcycle accident. And I was told there's a high probability I'd never walk again. Right. And so you have these moments that arguably horrible things happen that you kind of do have a choice. Now, this is you, the person who's had these things happen to you. And after the normal stages of like anger and denial, and, you could look up those stages, right?
Yep.
You're kind of left with a choice. And there's a few frames that I've thought of this as you were talking, man. Like the first one that I think is valuable is to like expand the frame like this. And I think of almost like 3 E's. Like the first one is expand. So you expand the frame and you look at from a global perspective or from a further out, zoomed out, perspective. Have there been other people that have gone through similar things? Mm-hmm. And what is my challenge in relation to theirs in terms of severity, in terms of the impact, in terms of like how bad I have it or how bad this thing has happened to me versus other people. So that's the first thing, is like expand to get some perspective, right? And sometimes, you stub your toe in that moment, like that feels like a big deal, but you expand that frame and all of a sudden you realize you stub your toe. The other one I'm thinking of is like is evaluating this could maybe be your second E, which is like evaluate like the situation you're in terms of your choices, because like you can like if you play this out to its extremes, you can be hurt the rest of your life, and you can choose to never date again, and you can choose to never get on a motorcycle again, and you can choose to do these things. And what is the implication of that? And what is the probability of that leading to a favorable outcome? Or can I get back on a bike, learn the mistakes I made? Can I get back in a relationship, start dating again, this time create a vision for my perfect spouse in my relationship? Like, what are the things that I can actually do to avoid this in the future? And then just let it be the blip that it is. And by the way, they're almost, not all, but most of them like are recoverable. And you have that choice to move forward. And maybe the third one is look for evidence of that with other people. That'd be the third E, right? Evidence. So like, have there been people who have gone through similar things and now they are, here, listen, you said this before. Not only do we not know our own story that we tell ourselves, but most people don't even know our story from the outside, right, let alone the inside. And so we don't know what people have gone through. But I'll tell you, dude, almost everybody I meet has or is going through something. And many, if it's something in the past, they're on the other side. And if it's something they're currently going through, maybe they're not quite there to see the other side yet. But like, and I know that over time, if they make the right choices, if they make the conscious decision to to really use this as hey, this is just one of the things that life throws me. And like you as well, my faith kind of grew through this as well. Like that could be just that opportunity for them to kind of go to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. In fact, I mean, I like those 3 E's. I think that's cool. It's, said in a little bit different way. And what popped up in my head as you were talking about this is, in some situation, I don't think it's all of them, but you can ask yourself, like, will this matter tomorrow? Right?
Or in 6 months, or in a year, or 10 years.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and
Right?
then if you say, okay, yeah, it'll matter tomorrow. Will this matter in 6 months?
Yeah, dude.
Will this matter in 10 years? In
right.
20
Expand
years, right?
the scope, right?
Right. And when you start asking those questions, all of a sudden, but here's the thing. One important aspect that you need to recognize is we have something called confirmation bias. So it's built into us. And what we're doing is we're looking for something to confirm with what we already know to be true. That's why there are so many, it's hard for people to see a different side of things, right? So if you recognize that, when you are asking that kind of question of like, will this matter in 20 years, right? You have to be kind of expand that thinking and not just looking from the perspective of confirming your own self, because for instance, like if I said like, something that happened when I was 8 years old, right? The whole frying pan incident that probably listeners heard about. Will this matter right now? Well, I could say, yeah, it does matter right now because guess what? It's shaped me who I am, blah, 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 all kinds of different things I can say that will be negative thing, right? But because if I use that confirmation bias conversation, but if I look from that perspective, I would say this, that frying pan incident, yes, it did get me to where I'm at, but without this, I would not be sitting here talking to you right now. I would not be a coach. I would not be on this podcast. I would not be in the United States and all kinds of different things, right? So notice the story that I told myself is much more impactful, right? And it's helping me go and actually help other people. So I think one other aspect that we didn't mention, I think is really important in this, that I think is important when people look from to shifting that story. I see the commonality with a lot of people when they do shift that story is they add an element of helping someone else, impacting someone else, being out there for someone else, to use my story. Because I think when, we go and add this contributing to the world, impacting the world, and doing something for someone else, all of a sudden you start to get out of this, kind of a negative thinking, get out of the victim mentality or whatever it might be, to be able to go and actually help someone.
Dude, I'm reminded of, and this has been passed around quite a bit, but maybe there are people that haven't heard it. The parable of the Chinese farmer, where the farmer's horse runs away and all the neighbors are like, oh my gosh, it's so bad. I can't, I'm so sorry. And they pity him. And the next day, the horse comes back with several wild horses, and now the neighbors congratulate him, and they're like, this is amazing. And he's like, well, yeah, maybe. And then the farmer's son tries to tame one of the wild horses, and he falls off and breaks his leg. And the neighbors are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And they're offering sympathy. And then the farmer, they're like, this must be so bad, so terrible. And the farmer's like, well, yeah, maybe. And then like a few weeks later, the army officers come to the village and they draft all the young men, but he doesn't go because his leg is broke. And, and it continues like this. And we're like, we see these things in a small snapshot or a small frame of, and admittedly, and like, this is just a natural kind of feature, I guess, of our perspective. But like, if imagine the term, and by the way, to me, this introduces a whole nother level of stability and of peace and calmness in your life.
Oh yeah.
Like when you can really just roll with the punches, really, and you're like, okay, well, it happened. Like, what do we do now? Because listen, all of us are gonna, I was just talking this with my wife recently. It's like, our parents are getting older. Like, people are gonna die. Like that's something for all of us. Like, and there's gonna be, dude, I'm looking at Rusty right now. He's 17, right? Like, Rusty's gonna die.
Your dog is 17 years old?
Yeah, dude.
Wow.
Yeah. And so like, and by the way, he's had stage 4 kidney disease for like over a year, kidney failure.
That dog is unbelievable. He's
Dude,
a super dog.
like he's sitting here like in his bed. Like,
is he getting any kind of retirement benefits from you? I mean,
oh, dude, I give him like human food all the time now. Like, cause I'm like, dude, live your best life, Rusty. You do
right.
that. Okay, detour. So like,
he eats better than you, huh?
dude, yeah, legit. But like, listen, like, you just gotta like make that decision like when you're ready, you know. And yes, I know you got to be careful about if someone you know is going through this, you don't go in there, I think, there and try and cheer them up like necessarily in a way that's minimizing what they're going through or grief or pain or whatever. But like at some point, like I think you have to make a decision like that this is not going to be the end, right? Because life goes on.
Yeah. Also, the other thing, you just alluded to this in this little story. By the way, I've never heard that story, so I appreciate
really?
you
Okay.
sharing. I've had different. I think it was a Polish farmer in my story, kind of a thing, right?
And they were chasing the cows home when the cows come home.
That's right. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, yeah, actually, you know what? That story, you could use the same kind of because I actually was dragged by a cow, right? When I was younger.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So that my story, right? But the thing is, one of the things that I think I'm getting out of that story is think about it this way. It can always be worse. People don't look at it like, they look at it like my life is bad. It could always be worse. There's always something that can be even worse that you never, so be grateful for what that moment is giving you. And I know it's easier said than done in a lot of those different cases, you know what I mean? But there is some truth to that. And I think that the story illustrates really well how we sometimes, living in a moment from a negative perspective, I think that impacts us. Because look, one day, horse ran away. The other way, oh, he got 3 horses now. Oh, great. The next day, broke his leg. Bad, right? And then good. It's like expanding that horizon, I think, is important.
And I think, like, dude, I love your story, man, because like it's we tend to minimize all of the things that led to moments, right? Like, so the fact that you and I are literally right now recording this podcast, think of all the things in your life, and some of them were good too, right? Of course. But you literally wouldn't be here. We probably would have never been introduced if you didn't go through divorce, if I didn't go through divorce.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, it would not happen. Yeah.
Right. So like, you gotta like, and many times I do think it takes time and reflection to see those and connect those dots. You can't connect the dots, I don't think, that easily, like, until you have the picture, right? Like, so when you're looking at your coloring book, I'm doing this with my kids now, we're doing, connect the dots. And you don't know what the picture is until you connect the dots. And so that's kind of how it works in real life too. You can't connect the dots until afterwards. And so you just got to have that faith and operate by that principle and that foundational belief that, like, I will be able to connect these, but I also have the choice to continue to connect them and not just give up before the picture's done.
Right. But also it's important too is while you're connecting the dots, how are you operating that space? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's the story that keeps reinforcing whether or not are connecting the dots in a more, for lack of a better word, more empowering way or more disempowering way.
Yep.
Because you can meet someone who's a victim for entire life, and they're connecting the dots in a very disempowering way.
I got a buddy right now who's going through some stuff. Excuse me. And he's had a lot of like mishaps and misfortune, and I can see it from the outside, but it's some of the way that he's viewing life and some of the way he's showing up, and it's having an effect. And and at the same time, that's going to continue until you kind of make some different choices as a person. Like, it's like, hey, is the whole world wrong, or do I have some things to learn?
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's why it goes back to looking for the lessons in that, silver lining or whatever you want to call it.
Yep. Well, listen, I hope you guys have enjoyed this conversation. I know it's kind of like not really a super uplifting one, but I hope it's empowering. Like, and I hope this really, like, if you're going through something right now, or you have recently, or someone has recently, maybe you can find a spark or a glimmer of hope to just see something beyond what you're currently experiencing that's better than you currently have that may lead you somewhere that you never would have expected, somewhere incredible, somewhere like, so much better and further along than you ever would have imagined. And so I hope that's true for you. If you enjoyed this, leave us a review, leave us a rating, and share it with somebody who might need to hear it. All right, we'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.